My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I'm 42 years old, and I didn't know my marriage was already over until I was standing barefoot in my own driveway, watching my clothes fly out of a second-floor window like evidence being discarded. A sweater hit the concrete first, then a pair of jeans, then the framed photo from our anniversary, the glass shattering on impact. "Get out of my house!" My husband's voice came from upstairs, loud, shaking, unrecognizable. His face appeared in the window a moment later, red with rage, eyes burning with something I had never seen in the 6 years I'd known him. "This is my house," he shouted, "and I won't let you hurt my daughter." I stood there frozen, keys still in my hand, my brain refusing to catch up with the moment. Hurt his daughter. Only hours earlier, we'd shared coffee at the kitchen counter. He'd kissed my temple, asked if I wanted almond milk or oat. Nothing had felt broken. Now, behind him in the window stood Lila, 17, quiet, carefully composed. She had one hand on his shoulder, like she was steadying him, like she was the adult here. Her eyes met mine briefly, and for just a fraction of a second, she smiled. Not wide, not obvious, just enough to let me know this wasn't panic. This was victory. My stomach dropped. I tried to speak, but my voice caught somewhere between shock and disbelief. "Daniel," I said, lifting my hand slowly, like sudden movement might make this worse. "Please, whatever you think happened, we need to talk." He recoiled at the sound of my voice. "Don't manipulate me," he snapped. "I've heard enough." That's when it hit me. There had already been a trial, and I hadn't been invited. Another box flew out the window. This one heavier, my laptop, the one I used for work. It cracked open when it hit the driveway. Something inside me cracked with it. Lila gasped theatrically behind him. "Dad, please," she said softly. "Just let her go." Let her go. Like I was a danger being removed. Like I wasn't the woman who had packed her lunches, paid for her phone, sat through parent-teacher meetings alone when Daniel was traveling. Like I hadn't built my entire life around keeping this family steady. Daniel pointed toward the street. "You have 30 minutes, he said. "Then I'm calling the police." "For what? Existing?" I bent down slowly and picked up the shattered frame. My reflection stared back at me through broken glass. Pale, shaking, unrecognizable. I looked up at them one last time. At my husband, the man who once promised to protect me. At his daughter, who now held that power instead. And the question lodged itself in my chest like a splinter I knew would never come out clean. How did I become the villain in my own home, without ever knowing I was on trial? If you had asked me, even a month ago, when things started to go wrong, I would have said they didn't. That's the lie people like me tell themselves. The truth is, nothing ever explodes without a slow leak first. I met Daniel Whitmore 4 years ago at a small cafe near my office. One of those places with mismatched chairs and plants that never quite look alive. I was there every Thursday morning before work. Same order, same corner table. He started coming around after his wife passed. Cancer. 3 years before I ever met him. You could still see her absence on him, not as drama, but as a permanent indentation, like a ring left on a table long after it's been removed. He was polite, quiet, grateful for conversation without pity. And then there was Lila, 13 at the time, small for her age, always in oversized hoodies, eyes that stayed lowered unless you spoke directly to her. She carried grief differently, not loudly, not rebelliously, but tightly. Like if she let go even a little, something catastrophic would spill out. On our third accidental conversation, Daniel told me about her. "She doesn't really talk much anymore," he said, stirring his coffee. "She used to, before." I didn't ask before what. You don't rush grief, you don't interrogate it. We took things slowly. 8 months of dating before we even talked about marriage. And before I ever said yes to his proposal, I sat Lila down, just the two of us, at the kitchen table. I remember my hands shaking. "I'm not here to replace your mom," I told her carefully. "No one ever could. I just want to be someone safe for you." She nodded. Didn't smile. Didn't cry. Just said, "Okay." At the time, I thought that was acceptance. Now I understand it was evaluation. The first 2 years after we married were peaceful. Not perfect, but stable. Lila kept her distance, and I respected it. I never pushed for titles, never asked her to call me anything other than my name. I helped when she asked, stayed out of the way when she didn't. I drove her to school when Daniel traveled, covered her phone bill, bought clothes when she outgrew hers faster than expected. When she wanted her own space, I was the one who suggested we move. I bought the house myself, larger, quieter, in a better district. My name on the deed, my savings, my responsibility. Daniel told everyone how lucky he was. He said I was good for Lila. I believed him. Looking back, I can see the moment the air changed. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. Lila started making comments to her father when she thought I wasn't listening. You know, Mom would have loved that dress on you. You deserve someone who spoils you. You work too hard. Small things. Sweet on the surface, sharp underneath. I brushed it off. Teenagers say strange things. Grief doesn't move in straight lines. But then came the comparisons. Whenever Daniel and I set boundaries, curfews, screen time, expectations, Lila would mention her mother. She wouldn't have said no. She trusted me. She understood. Daniel usually shut it down at first. She's not here, Lila, he'd say gently, and Eleanor isn't your enemy. But the comments didn't stop. They just spread, quietly, relentlessly. And somewhere along the way, I noticed Daniel watching me more closely. Not angrily, not accusingly, just observing, like he was looking for something. I couldn't have known then that someone had already started rewriting my role in this family. All I knew was that the house felt colder, and that every time I tried to name it, I was told it was just teenage adjustment. I believed that, because believing anything else would have meant admitting something far worse was already taking root. There's a special kind of damage that doesn't bruise the skin. It settles somewhere quieter, between sentences, in the pauses after doors close, in the way people stop looking at you directly. That's where it started. Lila learned how to split herself in two. When Daniel was around, she laughed, joked, rolled her eyes at me in that exaggerated, harmless teenage way that said we're all on the same side. She'd ask about dinner, about school, about whether I could drive her somewhere later. But the second he left the room, she disappeared. Her face went blank. Her answers turned flat. One word. 2, if I was lucky. Want to grab food? No. Need help with homework? I'm fine. It was like talking to a closed door. The first time I noticed it clearly, I actually laughed afterward, told myself I was projecting. That teenagers needed space, that grief didn't follow schedules. So I tried harder. I suggested outings, movies, coffee, even therapy, framed gently, optional, supportive. She declined everything. And then, like clockwork, Daniel would come home. And suddenly she was animated again, smiling, chatty, warm. I started wondering if I was imagining the difference. Gaslighting doesn't always come from words. Sometimes it comes from silence. The real shift happened 3 months later, the day Lila asked for a car. Not a car. A $35,000 BMW. She said it casually, like she was asking for a charger. All my friends have one. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't laugh. I explained. I told her a first car should be safe, reliable, reasonable. I suggested a used sedan, around $10,000. I even offered to match whatever she saved from a part-time job. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. Her lip trembled. Then she stood up and walked out of the room. 10 seconds later, her bedroom door slammed. That night, Daniel barely spoke to me. When I asked what was wrong, he sighed. Deep, disappointed. She's been through a lot, he said. You didn't have to shut her down like that. I felt something tilt. I didn't shut her down, I said carefully. I set a boundary. He looked at me then, really looked. You don't understand maternal instincts, he said quietly. The words landed harder than any accusation. From that night on, things changed fast. Lila started having whispered conversations with her father that stopped the moment I entered a room. Daniel began asking me questions that felt rehearsed. Do you think you treat her differently when I'm not around? She says you're colder in private. Why would she feel unsafe telling you things? Every answer I gave seemed to make it worse. Defending myself sounded like denial. Denying sounded like guilt. And every argument ended the same way. Are you calling my daughter a liar? There was no right response. I started doubting my memory, my tone, my face. I replayed conversations in my head at night, wondering if I'd been harsher than I realized. Colder, sharper. I even apologized for things I wasn't sure I'd done, just to keep the peace. That's when I knew something was wrong. Because peace shouldn't require self-erasure. Then came the day Daniel asked me, flatly, did you ever grab her arm? The room went cold. No, I said immediately. Never. He nodded, but his eyes didn't soften. They searched, and somewhere upstairs a door creaked. I didn't know it then, but the lie had already been planted. It was just waiting for the right moment to bloom. The call came on a Tuesday. Daniel asked me to come home early. His voice was tight, controlled in that way people get when they're trying very hard not to fall apart. We need to talk, he said, about Lila. I drove home with my stomach in my throat, replaying every conversation from the last few weeks, trying to locate the mistake I hadn't known I was making. When I walked through the front door, the house was silent. Too silent. Daniel was standing in the living room, arms crossed. Lila sat on the couch, knees tucked to her chest, staring at the floor like she was afraid to look up. Before I could speak, Daniel stepped forward. "She says you hurt her." The words didn't register at first. "Hurt her? How?" He didn't answer. He just turned to Lila and said softly, "Show me." She hesitated, just long enough to look believable. Then she pushed up the sleeve of her hoodie. Purple, yellow, green. Finger-shaped bruises wrapped around her upper arm. The room tilted. "I didn't do that," I said, too fast, too loud. "Daniel, I swear." He stepped back like my voice alone was dangerous. "She says it happened when I wasn't home," he said. "She says you grabbed her, hard." My chest burned. "I have never touched her like that," I said, shaking now. "Not once. You know me." He did. 4 years of knowing me. 4 years of watching how carefully I moved around his grief, his child, his home. But none of that mattered, because Lila started crying. Not sobbing. Crying quietly, like she didn't want to make a scene. "I didn't want to tell you," she whispered. "I was scared." Daniel broke. I could see it in the way his shoulders caved, the way his hands clenched and unclenched, like he didn't know what to do with them. I reached for him. He flinched. That was the moment everything ended. "I can't risk her safety," he said hoarsely. "Not even for a second." I grabbed his hands, desperate. "Think," I begged. "Please, have I ever been violent? Ever?" He pulled away. "That's exactly what scares me," he said. "She says you're different when I'm not here." From the staircase, Lila watched. For a split second, her face was curious, like she was studying how well her performance was landing. Then she noticed me looking. Her expression shattered into terror. "Dad," she cried suddenly, running down the steps. "Please don't make me stay with her." That was it. That was the nail. Daniel told me to pack a bag. Told me I needed to leave until things were clear. I stood there shaking, numb, as the life I'd built evaporated in front of me. As I walked toward the door, I glanced back. Lila was hugging her father tightly, her face buried in his chest. But hidden from him, hidden from everyone. Her mouth curved upward. Just slightly. I left without arguing, because arguing would have made me look guilty. Because screaming would have proven the lie. I drove to my sister's house with my hands locked on the wheel, one thought pounding over and over in my head. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a setup, and whoever planned it had planned it well. The first week after Daniel threw me out of the house, I barely ate. I slept on my older sister Marianne's couch, staring at the ceiling at night, replaying everything frame by frame, not to relive it, but to dissect it. Like if I could just find the crack in the lie, the whole thing would collapse. Marianne wanted me to fight immediately. "Call him, demand proof, don't just disappear," she said. But I knew better. When someone believes a story because it protects them from pain, facts sound like attacks. So I went quiet, and I got methodical. I hired a family law attorney, Patricia Kim, the kind of woman who listens without interrupting and takes notes like she's already 10 moves ahead. When I finished telling her everything, she asked one question that stopped me cold. "Who owns the house?" "I do," I said. "Bought it before the marriage. Sole name on the deed." She nodded once. "That gives you leverage, but you're going to need truth. Documented, undeniable truth if you want closure instead of permanent damage." Closure, not reconciliation. That word mattered. Through Patricia, I was referred to a private investigator, Marcus Hale. I felt ridiculous at first, like I was starring in some paranoid thriller version of my own life, until he started finding things. The joint account Daniel and I used for household expenses had been quietly drained, small withdrawals over months, $8,000 total. Gaming equipment, luxury clothing, high-end electronics, all tied to Lila. Some purchases required parental approval. Daniel had approved them, without telling me. Then came the credit card. A new one, opened 2 months earlier. Maxed out. Again, mostly Lila's spending. The picture sharpened into something ugly. This wasn't just emotional manipulation. This was preparation. The final blow came from digital evidence Marcus recovered. Messages between Lila and one of her friends. No filters, no performance. Just truth. She'd planned the bruise. Documented it. "I'll tell him tonight," she said in the clip. "He'll believe me. He always does." I threw up when I watched it. Not just from horror. From grief. 3 weeks after I was forced out, Daniel texted me. "Have you reflected on your behavior?" That was it. No apology, no doubt, no concern. "Just a test," I replied with one sentence. "Meet me tomorrow, 3 p.m., cafe on 8th. He arrived hopeful. Smaller, tired, still convinced I'd break. I didn't. I slid a thick envelope across the table. Divorce papers on top. Evidence underneath. The color drained from his face in stages. Confusion, disbelief, horror. Then I played the video. He made a sound I'll never forget, something between a sob and a gasp. Lila burst into the cafe moments later, furious, exposed, unraveling. She tried to spin it. Blame me. Call it fake. Until Daniel looked at her and asked quietly, "Why?" She didn't answer, because there was no answer that could save her. I stood up, told Daniel he had 30 days to vacate my house. He didn't argue. A month later, I moved into a small 2-bedroom across town. It's quiet here, peaceful, sometimes sad, mostly free. Love built on blind belief isn't love. It's surrender, and I will never surrender myself like that again.